In the last issue, a serious conflict had just broken out in the Middle East, and I chose to address the issue of war in a very large manner. And I did not focus on what was actually happening there because I record these on Sundays. And by Sunday, nobody knew anything. There were so many reports issued of this, that, and the other horrific thing. And then 5 minutes later, people denying it, photographic, video evidence, all being shared. Some of it turned out to be from years ago. Crazy stuff, craziness, as is conflict. I feel for the people who want to live there in their houses and raise their families and have their gardens and sing their songs and dance their dances. And for the rest of them, they too are white elephants, trampling over the people's gardens. All right, I'm getting a little bit dramatic. I'm sorry about that. I think we'd better go inside. I have a green screen set up in there, so come and join me. Voila! Welcome to my recording studio. Yes, we're going to talk about some very specific white elephants today, and some of the things that these white elephants are doing to make our lives miserable. Let's talk about someone who's being talked about an awful lot, but not in the right way. He wants to be Speaker of the House. He's got people supporting him, but does he have enough? Let us hope that he doesn't. Because I'm talking about Jim Jordan. All right, the first thing I want to show you is Jim Jordan's current website. I think it is very potent. Jim Jordan is leading the fight to hold Washington accountable. Jim Jordan's background as a 4-time state champion and 2-time collegiate champion in the sport of wrestling helped prepare him to take on some of the toughest political opponents in Washington. But not the team doctor. He never took on the team doctor. He never stood up for his boys. What am I talking about? Well, let's just flip over to the next tab. This one is from 2018. Where are we now? 2023? Okay. Powerful GOP rep Jim Jordan, accused of turning blind eye to sexual abuse as Ohio State wrestling coach. It's sad for me to hear that he's denying, said one former wrestler. I don't know why he would, unless it's a cover-up. I like this caption. Representative Jim Jordan, the powerful Republican congressman from Ohio, is being accused by former wrestlers he coached more than 2 decades ago at Ohio State University of failing to stop the team doctor from molesting them and other students. What a guy. The university announced in April that it was investigating accusations that Dr. Richard Strauss, who died in 2005, abused team members when he was the team doctor from the mid-1970s to the late 1990s. Jordan, who was assistant wrestling coach at the university from 1986 to 1994, has repeatedly said he knew nothing of the abuse until former students began speaking out this spring and continued to deny it on Tuesday. He was shocked. He couldn't believe it. His denials, however, have been met with skepticism and anger from some former students and members of the wrestling team. 3 former wrestlers told NBC News that it was common knowledge that Strauss showered regularly with the students and inappropriately touched them during appointments, and said it would have been impossible for Jordan to be unaware. One wrestler said he told Jordan directly about the abuse. Before I go further, there's something about wrestling. The ancient Greeks and their wrestling imagery and how important it was in the Olympics and how homoerotic it seemed to be to the Greeks, who were really more interested in the men were more interested in the men, and I don't know what the women were doing, but They certainly weren't wrestling. At any rate, wrestling nowadays is something that seems to attract sickos because they get such wonderful views of the male physique in action and they get turned on by it. So, they put themselves in a position where they can see it as a regular diet, and it gets to them. Now, I haven't read any studies, but I'm just making these assumptions. Take it with a grain of Wanda's salt. Former head coach Russ Hellickson, Jordan's mentor, said in a recent video made by Mike DeSabato, a former wrestler, that Hellickson had told Strauss that he was being too hands-on with students. DeSabato, whose allegations against Strauss prompted Ohio State to open its investigation, called Jordan a liar. I consider Jim Jordan a friend. Considered, DeSabato said. But at the end of the day, he is absolutely lying if he says he doesn't know what was going on. DeSabato said he reached out to Jordan this year before going to the university to tell Jordan that he planned to go public with his allegations. Jordan told him to please leave me out of it, DeSabato said. He asked me not to get him involved. Hey, there's the great brave hero, isn't it? What a coward. Let's move on to another article. 6 former wrestlers say Representative Jim Jordan knew about abusive OSU doctor. And this is from CNN, and I believe it's 2020. Tito Vasquez says he still remembers the day 3 decades ago when, as a wrestler at Ohio State University, the doctor he'd gone to see about a bloody nose insisted on examining his genitals. He also recalls how one of his coaches dismissed his immediate complaint. I have nothing to do with this, Vasquez quoted the assistant coach saying, as he effectively ended the conversation and went on with wrestling practice. That coach, Vasquez says, was Jim Jordan, now an Ohio congressman and an influential voice in Republican politics, perhaps best known for his pugnacious defense. Pugnacious, what a lovely word. Pugnacious defense of President Donald Trump during the recent impeachment proceedings. Vasquez is one of 6 former OSU wrestlers who told CNN in recent interviews that they were present when Jordan heard or responded to sexual misconduct complaints about team doctor Richard Strauss. Okay, so that's 2020. And here it is, October 2023, and we're still not resolved with this issue of Jim Jordan and his knowledge of what was going on in those showers. Ex-Ohio State wrestlers say Jim Jordan unfit for speakership for ignoring sexual abuse scandal. Former athletes say Jordan, as assistant coach, ignored sexual abuse at the university and does not deserve to be House Speaker. I would agree with that. Also, he's head of the Freedom Caucus and is a pro-Trumpy and supports all the wrong things. Yes. And there's a picture of him. Former Ohio State wrestlers who accused Jim Jordan of ignoring sexual abuse when he was a coach said the hard-right Republican should not be elected Speaker of the U.S. House. Heard that little pun there. Hard-right Republican. White elephant. Yeah. And do you really want a guy in that job who chose not to stand up for his guys? Mike Schick, one of hundreds of wrestlers who say they were assaulted by a team doctor, told NBC News. Is that the kind of character trait you want for a House Speaker? Is it? Another former wrestler, Danyasha Yates, told NBC he doesn't deserve to be House Speaker. He still has to answer for what happened to us. Jordan, 59, and a founder of the hard-right Freedom Caucus, is competing for the speakership with Steve Scalise. So this is a little bit old, a few days old, who's already dropped out. And Jordan, as of last Friday, has the exclusive nomination, but does he have the votes? And by all accounts, he's missing about 40 votes from the Republicans who refused to vote for him. So good for you. Do not vote for this chicken shit. He's a chicken shit. He chose not to see what was there in front of him. Before entering politics, Jordan was an assistant OSU wrestling coach from 1986 to 1994. And a side note, his son is now a collegiate wrestling coach, went through the wrestling thing. A lot of these men like to go into wrestling for whatever reason. I think that it's not always sexual, but there is definitely a need for power over another individual. I mean, that's what wrestling is. Yeah, you got to move the other guy to the position where he's helpless. Kind of a creepy sport, if you ask me, in more ways than one. By the way, Richard Strauss, the team doctor, died by suicide in 2005. Jordan has long denied helping orchestrate a cover-up. On Tuesday, a spokesperson told NBC, Chairman Jordan never saw or heard of any abuse. Nope, didn't see it. No, nothing. Nope. And if he had, he would have dealt with it. Oh, yeah, right. But Jordan also refused to cooperate with an official investigation, which found Strauss's abuse was an open secret, and that coaches, trainers, and other team physicians were fully aware of Strauss's activities, and yet few seemed inclined to do anything to stop it. At one hearing, another former wrestler, Adam DeSabato, said Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling on the 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother, begging me, crying for half an hour. That's the kind of cover-up that's going on here. He's a coward. Before we leave Jim Jordan behind, let's hope we leave him behind. Let's hope he doesn't get it tomorrow. We'll have to see. I record on Sunday, so tomorrow we'll know, or today as you watch this. Anyway, here's his district in Ohio. Check it out. This is like gerrymandered to a T, to an S, to a 5. I don't know what that is. Look at this. Look at this gerrymandered district. It goes all the way up to Lake Erie. Pretty close to Akron there. And then it comes across the lake line and then down to Mansfield, but it isn't in Mansfield. It probably is not picking up any major cities. Here's a close-up. I don't see any major cities here. It's a bunch of people spread out over this S that don't talk to each other and are clueless about politics, and they'll just vote for Jim Jordan until his name isn't on the ballot anymore, because that's what you do in Ohio counties. This is my e-reader for the Akron Beacon Journal. I don't need paper cluttering up my dumpster. This is Friday's edition. Citizens Not Politicians, spearheaded by former Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, wants to remove politicians from the process of drawing new state house and congressional maps and replace them with a 15-member citizen commission. Ooh, I love it. Power to the people, baby. The group argues that the current Ohio Redistricting Commission has gerrymandered districts and failed voters, even though Republicans and Democrats recently approved new state house districts. And they did it because they were coerced, really. On Thursday, the Ohio Ballot Board, led by Ohio's Secretary of Snake, Frank LaRose, unanimously approved the proposed constitutional amendment as one issue instead of dividing it into multiple measures. For Ohioans of all political persuasions, this is a big day because the citizens are one step closer to taking the driver's wheel and putting the politicians in the back seat, O'Connor said in a statement. This amendment will end gerrymandering in Ohio by putting citizens, not politicians, in charge of drawing legislative districts. In the meantime, we've had to put up with the likes of Jim Jordan and other pathetic creatures for how many years now? 5 years? We thought it was settled 5 years ago. We as citizens have already 2 super important ballot initiatives on the ballot in November. You know, it all started in August with issue number 1, the right for a simple majority to propose a yes on a state constitutional amendment. And now we have 2 of them, and they only have to win by 51% of the vote. Number 1 is the right to reproductive freedom for all citizens. Yay! And you know what? It's going to win in what everyone thinks is conservative Ohio. Because when it comes down to these issues, well, there's been a very effective commercial running, and I don't know if I can find it or if I'm allowed to play it, but I've seen it on YouTube. So the way the yes people are framing it effectively, I think, is by having these people, citizens, come on, like there's a minister doing one right now who says, I counsel lots of families, and it is always an individual choice that the family needs to make. The government has no business interfering with that family's choice. Such a perfect way to frame it here in Ohio. Of course, the people who are against it use the same old tired anti-abortion language, which we all sort of block out of our ears because we've heard it so often. So second thing to vote for is issue 2, which is legalizing marijuana for recreational use. We already have it for medical use, and everyone, I think, is going to vote for it. It only needs a simple majority, and it's going to say no, because the state will get money from the taxes. They'll be able to regulate it. People who are buying it will know that it's organic. There's no toxins in the pot. You know, it's a win-win situation for all. So that's happening. And then next year we'll vote on redistricting. That's how we're going to have to get rid of these horrible people like Jim Jordan. We're going to have to take that S and squish it and put him in a district that's like all Democrats and see how he lands. Ha ha ha. Well, at least in a district where there's opposition, because right now there's none. He's just raking in the money, getting the votes, going to Washington, pumping the fists, shaking the hands. Yeah, glad handing Speaker of the House. And what's he going to do with that power, huh? Can't do much now. He's going to have to figure out how to get a majority again next year. And I don't think it's going to be easy. Not at all. I'd like to remind everybody to get your COVID shots, your flu shots, your pneumonia shots, your RSV shots. Get all the shots and be prepared for the winter. And finally, quote of the week. To our friends in the United Auto Workers, solidarity, keep at it. I support you. You guys give me so much hope, because it is in the unions that people are working on the same level and realizing the power that they have as opposed to the power up here. It's gotta come level, really. Co-ops everywhere. But I digress. I just love Sean Fain, and he had a speech, and I wanted to quote it. Billionaires and company executives think us auto workers are just dumb. They think we don't get it. They think we only understand the power of a supervisor yelling at us or an assembly line coming at us. They look at me and they see some redneck from Indiana. They look at you and see someone they would never have over for dinner. or let ride on their yacht, or fly on their private jet. They think they know us, but us auto workers know better. We may be foul-mouthed, but we're strategic. So everybody, keep on strategizing. See you next time.